Hey, welcome everyone to Nerds Night Out. I'm your host, Tom Tormey, and I am blessed tonight to have with me Tim Smythe, a brother in so many ways. We have just about the same educational track record. We've been teaching just as long. We taught the same subject. We have the same passion for comic books. The big difference is Tim Smythe is a published author with an amazing book, Teaching with Comics, which was nominated this year for an Eisner Award, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to the show. Thanks very much for coming by.
Yeah, always great to see you, Tom. Always great.
I absolutely love your post, Tim, because every post is an eye opener for me. Because if I want to teach, if I want to help people teach about different subjects, you are my go-to. You are my authority on anything of value. Because saying that all comic books have educational value is the same as saying every single book belongs in the classroom, and that's just not the case.
Right.
But you have a compendium of knowledge, and you are able to really pick out just the best ones. That everything from uh, identity to history, and it's so well curated. Are you now in a position, because of your book Teaching with Comics, and because you have made a run a circuit of not just speaking to different districts, but are you now in a position where people are saying to you, "Hey, Tim, you got to check out this book," not just maybe from a fan point of view, but publishers as well?
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to get. I mean, I still spend an ungodly amount of money at the comic book store every week, but
God
like,
bless you.
yeah, Penguin Random House, Andrews McMeel. Like, there are publishers who send me arcs in the mail. They're like, "Hey, you might want to check this out," because they know that I'll read it and I'll share about it. And so,
Right.
just with the amount of followers that I have, and so I'll post them on my website. Like, here, I'm reading this book. Here's maybe a couple thoughts of how you could use this in the classroom, kind of a thing. And then sometimes that leads to some paid gigs where the publishers will then say, "Hey, here's a contract. We want you to write like an official teacher's guide for this book." And it's really kind of cool to do that because I do a lot of that work with my wife, who's also a teacher. So she teaches language arts, I teach history. So we're kind of a cool team with those kinds of things.
Oh, very cool. And those manuals are now going out into the classroom uh, with the book itself.
Yeah, so they'll put out like on their websites and things. Like I think probably the first one we did was Laurie Halse Anderson's Speak graphic novel adaptation a couple years ago. And so they'll put up on their website when you like search for the book, then up next to it will come the teacher guide. And so
Okay.
we're starting to see more and more publishers doing that. And I think because, some teachers have never used a comic book, have never read a comic book before,
Right.
or they don't know how to use it, or they're getting pushback from administration, and so they don't know how to defend that. And if they can say like, here's this teacher guide that's tied to Common Core, that's tied to all these standards and things like that, I think it makes it a lot easier for teachers. And the fact that publishers are willing to put these things out there for free, all that does is it helps sell more comics, get more of these graphic novels in the classrooms too. So it's like a win-win for everybody.
You mentioned the resistance that some teachers are having from administrators, from or just their own kind of lack of experience per se, with comic books. I'm sure, and I asked this question the other day of people. I said, "What's the hardest thing about being a comic book fan?" And some people had kind of echoed that notion that a lot of people still can't get past the onomatopoeia. It's always just like bam, pow, and they're still picturing the Adam West Batman, and in their minds, comic books are that they're entertainment, but don't necessarily have educational value. Uh, what do you say to people who present that side of comic books? They think it's just that the superheroes smashing and fighting, but here you come with no, it has value. How do you make that argument to people?
Oh, that's like a 2-hour conversation. But I think it's exactly that, and I say it all the time. I say, "When was the last time you were in a comic book store?" Right? And for a lot
Mhm.
of people, it's when they were a kid, and so they have that association, and they don't understand how much things have changed. Like even the superhero comic books themselves, like the typical capes and cowls. Like I'm going through a whole rereading of everything Tom King, who I absolutely love,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, like his comics are literature. Like they are deep and meaningful. And we see these superheroes, whether it be Vision with his family, right? We see this robot family as human beings and going through real problems. And like I'll stop reading and I have to like pause because it really makes me ponder like what does it mean to be human? And how do we see each other? And then we start to make connections to like the Frankenstein monster, and we start to like all these different things. So
Right.
even I don't want to discount the traditional superhero stories either, because there's all kinds of things that we're dealing with in superhero comics. But then it's what it's it's a medium, not a genre, right? So
Correct.
yeah, you've got autobiographies, you've got historical fiction, you've got history, you've got science novels, you've got all these different things. And so I think it's just a matter of, and that's like where my website comes in, right? If I can, like, teachingwithcomics.com, like it's all free.
Hmm.
And people say to me all the time, well, is there, and they're like, oh my God, yeah, there really is a comic for everything. If you're teaching history, if you're teaching economics, philosophy, uh, mental health, LGBTQ issues, civil rights, whatever it might be. And I think once people start to open their eyes to that, it's like, oh, okay, now I kind of see what you're saying. But even with that, it can kind of be overwhelming because then it's like that floodgates open.
Correct. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because now you've introduced a medium with a in class value, and now they're, like you said, it's a medium, not a genre. And in most people's mind, or at least for those outside of the industry, it is the medium and the genre are the same thing to them. Comic books mean one thing to them. So
Yeah.
overcoming that is sometimes a bit, sometimes insurmountable, overwhelming. But like you said, once those floodgates open, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's no different. Like I use a lot of hip hop in my classroom too. Like those are my two loves, hip hop and comic books. And I think some people are like, all hip hop is gangster rap, and it's not, right? Like
Right.
all country music is not the same, all whatever it might be. And there's a lot of positive, uplifting messages in many different hip hop music and artists and things like that. And it's used as a political movement. And again, I think that if you don't have that exposure, it's just a matter of opening up your eyes sometimes and kind of being willing to learn. And sometimes it's a matter of asking your students. Like you're gonna have experts in your classroom on manga, on comics, on
Mhm.
hip hop, on the things you don't know. And I think the students a lot of times are an untapped resource where they can teach us how they're learning.
I wholeheartedly agree, but I'm going to switch gears for a second. Well, not really, but to delve deeper into that concept you just said with hip hop. What role does music play in your teaching, especially when it comes to really history?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the most obvious example would be, like traditionally when, like for me growing up, you learn about the Vietnam War and you learn about
Hmm.
protest music, right? 1960s, 1970s. And then you can make that shift to say, okay, now let's take a look at the late 1980s and let's take a look at, let's say, Chuck D and Public Enemy and what are they pushing back against, right? And so
Right.
that's what I grew up with. And then you make those connections to today. And it's just that any kind of music, there's always this push for like I brought in the Smithsonian has this display at the African American History Museum and in the Smithsonian. They put together the top 50 songs of hip hop as history. You've got Chuck D's boombox that is displayed at the African American History Museum as history. And that's how it started in the streets. Like it was a political movement. Um, I'm getting off track here, but
No, no, no. It's perfect because I do love the idea of using music as, and especially like you said, with the kind of there's the protest music, the anti-war music, and oftentimes, I mean, I remember teaching about World War I, and of course, you listen to songs like "Over There," but at the same time, throughout World War I, throughout World War II, and so on and so forth, there are songs that kind of reflect that other side of the coin that often don't get discussed. I mean, uh, you could have a great lesson discussing Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land"
mm,
or "This Land Is Our Land," and oftentimes they leave out that last verse that really says, "You know what? Maybe this land is not made for you and me." And history sometimes kind of paints that rosy picture, but that the music is such a great hook. So it's awesome to see you doing that, and I'm sure it resonates well with the children.
yeah, like in fact, I'm excited because I'm going to take 2 days to watch the movie Swing Kids with my students. And it's about swing music in Nazi Germany, right before World War II begins. and it's a group of based on true stories, like German teenagers who were listening to outlawed American music, right? And so it was their way to push back against the totalitarianism of the
Right.
Nazis because they had banned because you've got Count Basie and you've got Django Reinhardt, you've got Jewish and black musicians. Like the Nazis don't want that. And so the kids watch it, and all of a sudden it's not like history's not that long ago because these teenagers are using their music to push back the way our teens are doing it today, the way
Correct.
that I did it in the 90s. It's no different. And we can use that music. And so I always use the example of, okay, so why was swing music so popular with these kids then? Because it was banned. Why did I fall in love with Public Enemy? Because my dad returned my CD to the store because he
Mm.
got angry about some of the lyrics. My dad was a cop. 911 is a joke, doesn't sit real well
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, no, no,
Right,
no.
right. But he didn't understand that the message of it, right?
Right.
And so it's a teenager today is like a teenager in the 90s, is like a teenager in the 60s, is like a teenager in the 20s, using that music as that medium to push back against adults and all those things.
If you wanted me to buy a CD in the '90s, all you had to do was slap that parental advisory sticker
Yeah,
on it,
yeah.
and I can't even imagine how much crap was sold because it strapped that sticker on it, and those record labels was like, "Thank you," what, Tipper Gore? I think she was the
Yep,
one,
yep.
responsible for thank you, Tipper Gore. She probably sold millions of albums that probably wouldn't have sold otherwise. But I
That's
agree, I mean, as a teenager, if the my parents and my teachers didn't want me listening to it, it was the greatest music in the world. It represented my kind of, uh standing up against authority kinda, and
right.
so,
That's right.
I agree with you. Teenagers, they're all children are generally the same. It doesn't matter what decade. Uh, how about have you tapped into, I know, music and comics, are there and there are so many other mediums that are often looked upon as juvenile. Uh, have you tapped into, like, animated films or, anything, along that lines that maybe has some value as well in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, a real good example would be something like Barefoot Gen, right? Which is based on a true story of survival from Hiroshima. And
Wow.
it's a 10-volume series. It's a real famous manga series around the world, but not as popular in the United States because, of course, we're the bad guys in the story. But it very much is an anti-war story. And it's great because it's 10 different books, and only in the first book does it actually get into the bombing. The rest of it is the part of history that we don't learn about, what happened after. And
Right.
so you're seeing this young boy trying to survive, right? So now then they made an anime adaptation of the books. And so we're talking about something as horrific as, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's multiple mediums that my students can learn about it. They can go and read the manga, they can go and watch some of the movie. We can read primary accounts. We read like interviews with Paul Tibbets who dropped the bomb. So it's all these
Mhm.
different things. And so then you can use the anime, you can use the manga to also get into Japanese culture, to get into, all those different things. And so it's not just reading a book, it's also a different style. And what's awesome is, I mean, most of these kids who listen to hip hop, who listen or to watch manga, who read anime, who love comic books, are sidelined a lot of times in the classroom. They don't get to share their passions.
Right.
And all of a sudden now, right, like their eyes light up, like, yeah, 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 I know an anime movie about this. And so again, I learn a lot by asking the kids, well, I'm not real strong on anime. What movies would you suggest? I'm not real strong in manga, which I'm learning a lot now about manga from my kids. Like, what titles would you suggest I read? And if a kid sees you reading a book that they suggest that you read, oh my God, like it's so powerful. Or when the kids suggest music, I'll put together a playlist for the classroom. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, I mean, you gotta be careful, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I say to the kids,
Uh,
like, look, I'm 50 years old. Like, if you give me a song, we're high school here. Like, I may not play it in the classroom, but I can listen to a song with some curse words in it. Like, that's okay. But tell me why you like that song. What does it mean to you, and those sorts of things. And it's just a whole different conversation.
and that is so great that, and really you're making them a part of the learning process.
Mhm.
And if they're gonna buy into it, they're definitely gonna get a lot more out of experience. I can only imagine every student that walks into your room does so with just, an abundance of joy, and I'm sure they leave the same way.
I hope so.
But I could always guarantee it. But as you're putting this together, as you're and we're talking about watching cartoons and learning, reading comics and learning. listening to music and learning. Tim, when you want to relax, can you do it? Can you just put on music and relax, or do you inherently look for that value outside of entertainment? What if you're gonna come home and it's been a long day in the classroom? What are you putting on to relax?
It is hard because if I'm reading a book, I got sticky notes with me, and I'm like, all right, well, wait, I could use it in my classroom this way.
Right.
Same thing with the music. Same thing with any of those kind of things. But I would say for me, like if I'm looking to relax, I quite often go back to just putting on Dave Matthews Band. Like that's my kind of. But even that, he has some songs about Native American genocide, and what I mean. Like there's always
Yeah.
something you can use. But he's kind of one of those people who I can just kind of put in the background and just kind of use it to tune out.
Oh, really? Dave Matthews, huh?
Yeah, Dave
All
Matthews.
right. How about in the hip hop genre? Wait, what are you going for? Public Enemy?
Dude, Public Enemy is always mine. Like Chuck D,
Mm,
like even as a white kid, but growing up in Philadelphia, like he blew my mind.
yeah,
Um, I mean, Flavor Flav, he's got all the theatrics and all that, but Chuck D,
gotta love it.
you're right, the words, like the,
Yeah.
the pushing back, the poetry, the all those things, and then that ties right in the Pac and all those kind of things. But um, yeah, I mean, I love music in general. I love Amazon Music because not to plug Amazon, but if you just like say to hit play music and it just goes through all the different things I listen to, and it'll be like 80s new wave, it'll go into hip hop, it'll go
Uh,
into big band music. And I just love that kind of just cycle where I'm not flipping albums. I'm not, it just, but when a new song comes on, I listen and I love that I'm still hearing new music.
right. And I don't. That's awesome that Amazon Music provides that. And I don't want to give Amazon Music a shameless plug, but man, Amazon Music, your go-to place for music.
There
Amazon Music, available now.
you go.
Uh, so just in case anyone from Amazon is listening and wants to, sponsor or whatever the hell. But all joking aside, that's great, Tim. Now all of this has brought you uh, a good deal of respect and admiration, not just from comic book fans themselves, but in the world of education. You've run a circuit now. You go district to district, right? Speaking uh, and just kind of exposing people to the medium. Uh, but you've also had the opportunity to publish your own book, uh, teaching with comics. How did that come about?
It came about because as I started doing presentations at conferences, and through my stuff on social media, everybody was like, "When are you writing your book? When are you writing your book? When are you writing your book?" And what I found out was, unfortunately, and I say it this way, is I was missing out on opportunities because I didn't have a book. That even though I've written articles for PBS NewsHour, even though I've been writing articles for different publishers, it's still, for whatever reason, we still put that weight behind having a book.
Hmm.
And since my book has come out, I've gotten more paid opportunities because I do have that book. And it seems to put a lot more weight behind it, where somebody can say to their principal, their superintendent, like, "Hey, let's bring this guy out. He has this book." Uh,
Right.
yeah, it just opens
It
up doors.
That gravitas.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I understand it. And this year, that book, Teaching with Comics, was nominated for an Eisner Award. When you got that notification, and I remember following your journey very closely on your social media. Tell us about that, just that exuberation. What was that feeling like?
Well, first I had to sit on it for a while before we were allowed to announce. So that's
Oh yeah,
really hard.
what?
Because they make they'll send me an email like 2 weeks ahead of time saying, hey, blah blah blah, you're nominated, but we're going to officially release it on this date. You're not allowed to
Gotcha.
talk about it before then, kind of a thing. But yeah, with
The Eisner goons will come to your
yeah,
door, break some kneecaps.
yeah,
We
uh,
said don't. We said 2 weeks.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing. Like I've presented out there a couple times at San Diego Comic Con, and you get your panel acceptance, but you're not allowed to tell the public until they publish their like official kind of
Mm,
report, which I get. But as an individual, it's like, oh, I just want to say it.
right. Right.
But yeah, with that came invitation to present at San Diego Comic Con again. I was invited to go to the San Diego Comic-Con Museum where I did an educator's workshop with my own family because my kids and my wife came with me. I did a book signing there, which was really cool. And then I got to go with my family. My kids got to go, and I still don't think they understand what a big deal it was, but we went to the Eisner Awards together. And so we're sitting in the room with Tom King and Tom
Right.
Keller and all these people. And I mean, it's a once in a lifetime experience. And I'm meeting all these people that I've seen in on social media, um, and they love the fact that their work is being used in classrooms. Like in some cases, that means more to them than some of even the awards that they get. Because, and I say it to my students all the time, like contact your heroes on social media. Let them know you're reading it. Let them know what you're doing. Let
Yeah.
them know, those sorts of things. It means the world to them to know that some 15-year-old kid in a teenager's world where, hey, that comic had that much of an impact on this kid, on that next generation of comic book readers. It was very affirming for me, and I wish more teachers had that. Like we were talking earlier about how stressful things are
Hmm.
in education, and I you don't get that kind of affirmation on a daily basis as a teacher. But when you get outside of your building, when you get outside of your district, when you can go to these conventions with like-minded people, and you realize like, yeah, like, okay, I get it. Like what we do matters. And
Right.
I've brought students with me to present at Comic Cons and things like that. And it's just, I don't know, like we all have like that, oh, this isn't real kind of a thing. And that idea of, what do they call it when you can't really accept that you've got that kind of
Oh,
gravitas.
the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
No. Well, Tim, actually, I was thinking about because the next thing I was going to ask you is, as you're in this room surrounded by artists and writers and all the creative types that you have been employing in the classroom, did you feel like you belonged?
I
Because
did. Um,
great, great.
yeah.
Because I was going to tell you because I always think of this the expression that said you're not stuck in traffic, you are the traffic, and I know that that's more in a negative connotation, but the idea is you're in this room because you deserve to be in that room. I've been following your journey now for years, and I could honestly say you are very deserving of that place, of to be in that room surrounded by those people. They were probably thinking the same thing about you. That they were, as you mentioned, hearing that there's now a teacher in this room that is using their work, and they're getting meaningful, uh, just feedback from you and your students. I'm sure they were just as in awe to be around you as you were of them.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but it's like, yeah, I mean, they're just regular people. Like they're, what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
They're
right.
your heroes and those kind of things, but they're just regular people. And I got invited to go out a couple different nights, and like, we met like Raina Telgemeier, who's like, the savior of graphic novels, and I get to show pictures of meeting these people in my classroom, and my students will walk in and be like, "Oh my God, and I'm like,
Yeah,
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 like we're not best friends or anything,
yeah.
but yeah, like, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Oh, Tom King. Yeah, that's just Tommy. We go way back.
Maybe
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
You get to throw. Yeah, listen, you're probably a celebrity. You're a celebrity to them. To the children you're meeting. That's cool. That's got to feel cool.
It does.
Yeah. Well deserved. And are there plans for a Teaching with Comics Volume 2, The Revenge?
Yeah. I don't know. There's probably what I want to do, and I think part of it is because I don't want to second guess myself. I still get the pushback on the comics thing.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm also like I'm a reading specialist. I've taught coursework at the University of Pennsylvania, graduate studies for literacy and things like that with educators and adult readers and learners. That I want to publish a book. My next step, I think, my next book is more on creating analytical readers and writers with some pop culture, with some comics thrown in, but also some of the other things that I do. I think, like, if you don't read the book, I think sometimes it still gets dismissed, as we know in the comics industry by some, that it still is not, it's not real, right? That I must be
Mhm.
a super easy teacher, or that it's a lot of fluff. And I'm like, no, we write, 10-page research papers in my classroom. I use these books in my advanced placement coursework. All those things. And so I kind of want both of those to kind of come together, where I live in those two worlds. But then I've had people suggest, well, maybe I should write a book on just elementary school, right? Or
Mhm.
just I could do it that way. But I also have some actual comic book ideas, some historical nonfiction type comic book ideas that I actually want to start publishing some of my own comic books as well. But that's a little bit, down the pike.
Oh, that's surprising and very cool. So, and then to become full circle, your books will then be studied in classrooms by teachers, analyzed and dissected.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is go to colleges and talk with education students. And then you get emails a year or two, 3 years later. Hey, I'm student teaching and I'm using your book and doing this, or I'm using that lesson that we talked about and I'm doing that, or hey, thanks for giving me a copy of that comic book during your seminar. Like, those sorts of things. That for me, and I realized like I was always hesitant to give up being like a classroom teacher, which I still am. Of not going into administration or being a curriculum supervisor like I wanted to, or whatever. But I realize now that you can have just as much or an even broader impact through other educators that you're influencing,
Mhm.
and right, who then teach their students, and then all those sorts of things. So we all have different roles, but we're all having that kind of an impact. So I don't know what the next couple of years are going to bring.
But the great thing is, there's a world of possibilities for you, and it seems as though not only with the students, but like you said, with the teachers that you're not only working with on a daily basis, but the ones that you've had a chance to talk to at conventions, at district seminars, and what talking at colleges, you're also creating a generation, or and so they have told two friends, and so on and so on, and you're creating this hopefully never ending, really, series of events that will lead to a greater understanding and appreciation of the medium. So it's a great thing you're doing. Uh, and about your website, teachingwithcomics.com, what kind of materials are available through the website?
So it's like I'll have you click on the waffle as they say on, and then it'll bring out categories: World War I, World War II,
Right.
LGBTQ, whatever. And so as I go through and I read books, I'll just throw them in there. And so it's not every book in the world, but they're books that I've actually read. A lot of times I'll write, like a small review. Like I said, sometimes I'll write some classroom ideas or some research links, those sorts of things. And people ask me all the time. It's like the worst thing when I'm doing a panel presentation. Hey, what's a good comic for, fill in the blank? And I'm like, go to my website. Like it's
Right,
hard
right.
to remember all those different titles and things. And so that's mostly where I got started, was just kind of parking things for my own future use.
Mhm.
And it kind of just started to grow from there. And so I say it all the time, like if I wasn't encouraged to share what I was doing, and I was by a man, AJ Giuliani, who worked with me in my school. He's like, man, you got to start sharing what you're doing. It's really cool. And I'm like, nah, like that's like what millennials do. And I don't show off. And I didn't know what social media was. And then I started to share it. And then, I realized like there's other people like me out there. I'm not the only one who does this. It gives people permission to do what they want, whether it's comics or something else. And so I just try to use that website as a platform to kind of share those things. When I interview, sometimes people like Nate Powell, who I absolutely adore, things like that, I'll put that on there. Right now, I have like I'm putting every book that I read this year on there, and putting down reviews and ways to use them in the classroom. So I'm trying to hold myself accountable for that, because you read a book and you just stick it on your shelf and then you forget about it, and then the end of the year comes and you're like, "Oh, I wish I had that list like I could share with everybody." So that seems to be popular. And then there's also the most popular part is free comics that I come across that people
Right.
give me permission to use or that are freely available, because we know budget wise we don't always have that. So free online digital comics that we can use in the classroom from all different levels, all different materials, and so for at least for that, a lot of people just keep coming back to that part of my website for those free resources, which is great.
Right. Yeah. No, no, that's fantastic. And it's amazing that you've made that all available in such a kind of concise and easy to access way. uh, I can only assume that either prior to or after the show, uh, you're gonna be reading a book. What are you reading currently right now? And what can you tell us about it?
It's funny you would say that because I was saying I was going back to reading all the Tom King stuff all over again, and I'm reading this. I'm about a third of the way through it, and it's called "A Once Crowded Sky" from Tom King, and it's prose, but it's about superheroes, and it's about this mysterious, almost like the Terrigen Mist, that created Miss Marvel and all those guys that comes out, and the villains lose their like they all die, and the superheroes then lose their powers, and then all these weird things start to happen. But again, it's Tom King, and it really like it forces you to question. Okay, so I've been a superhero my whole life. Now there's no more villains. Now I don't have superpowers. Who am I?
Right? Oh wow. Okay.
Right. Like, and it's just it's awesome. So that's what I'm reading now. Um, but the I don't know if you've but Ultimate Spider-Man and Avengers Twilight that just came out last week.
Okay. Yeah.
It kind of blew my mind. I mean, it's just there's all kinds of stuff that's out there. I mean, I got my stack here that I've been reading through, but the new Transformers that was just reset and the GI Joe universe.
Oh,
Are-
the new Energon universe from
yes,
Skybound.
yes, is
Oh
just
my gosh.
yes. It's like being a kid again.
And
Uh,
you know, absolutely. Have you read Cobra Commander yet?
yeah, I have it here. Yeah, awesome.
Oh, I didn't. I honestly didn't. You know, I just didn't think it would be hold its own. If that makes any sense. I'm like, oh, Cobra Commander, or maybe a one shot, but damn,
Yeah,
loved it, loved
yeah.
it.
I mean, GI Joe #1 was the first comic I ever bought with my own money, and that's what dragged me into all this. And now to see it kind of becoming new again, like it's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, and Larry Hama is on the book again.
He
I think.
is, yes.
Yeah,
And I said thank you to him a couple of times for like literally, you're the reason why I'm in all this. Like you're the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, because of the things that you've done.
we could definitely as I'm 45, so I'll say I'm an 80s kid mostly, but we could definitely endorse the Energon universe as
Yeah,
just great, great fun. I'm enjoy. I haven't read Duke yet, but I hear good things about
Duke's
it.
good. And my son, who's 15, he loves it too. So
Oh,
there you go.
oh, there you go. Listen, that's perfect. That's perfect. Next generation of GI Joe and Transformers fans.
Isn't that cool? Like
Yeah.
the same stuff that I loved as a kid, I'm talking to my kids about, whether it be Star Wars, whether it be like all that. Like I didn't have that with my dad, right? Like we didn't have that. I mean, I guess we had Star Trek, but we really didn't have that. But now it's like, wow, like we literally like the same stuff. I read the comic and I give it to my son, and then he reads it, and then we're talking about it. We're playing the same video games. We're watching the same movies. Like it's really cool.
That is cool. That is a great thing. Uh, I think with my dad, our big comment. I became a fan of John Wayne through him. He was a
Oh
big
yeah,
Western fan, and the most lasting. And I have a giant 1976 King Kong poster in my office, and he's the one who introduced me to monster movies, and two of my big loves. More monster movies than John Wayne, but still.
yeah. My dad was much more John Wayne. Yeah, it's funny.
I think children at that time, if it's you either got into some science fiction or you got into the westerns,
Yep,
especially when the movies. Yeah.
yep.
Uh, Tim, what's next for you? Any cons coming around the corner?
So I'm actually putting together on March 2nd, Saturday, March 2nd is Will Eisner week, that whole week. And so the Eisner Foundation asked that this is the second year in a row that I be part of that. And I've given them some advice from like the educationer standpoint. So I'm putting together a couple of panels. They're not finalized yet. I'll start advertising them in February, but we're really going to talk about the really the impact of Will Eisner on the industry. I use a couple of his books in my classroom, so I'll share kind of some of the lessons and things like that. I'm doing
Virtual or in
oh
person?
yeah, all virtual. Yeah. I'm doing PA education conference for the Pennsylvania Department of Ed in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is awesome in like 2 weeks. Uh,
Nice, nice.
and it's a tech conference, which I was always surprised, but I presented at ISTE, which is a tech conference in Philly last year, and all about using digital tools to create comics. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, and using digital storytelling. And I didn't realize how much, like, I don't consider myself a tech expert, but by the end of my presentation, everybody's like, "Yeah, no, you do a lot of tech, you just don't realize it." And I think we all do.
No, it's a good compliment coming, especially at a convention like that.
Yeah. And so, I try to keep challenging myself in different ways. And then, speaking of which, I started putting together some ideas for NCTE, which is the National Council for Teachers of English. I've done a lot of social studies type things. I've done things for libraries, but I
Mhm.
haven't done the English teacher route. And a lot of people have been telling me to present there. So that's in Boston next November. So just putting together the proposals, which are due on Wednesday, and see how that goes. But a lot of English teachers have been telling me that I should be going there too. So we'll see.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that people are gonna learn from your expertise and learn from your experience, and hopefully integrate everything they're learning into the classroom, because it's just tremendous way to reach young people in a time where we're competing with so much. So I applaud your efforts, both you, your wife, and just about everyone. And the gentleman you mentioned earlier that inspired you to share this, I owe him a big thank you as well, because I have used many of the resources on teachingwithcomics.com, and plan on sharing them with people that I work with. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like I get to do what I love to do, and
Right.
and I wish, because I didn't do it for a long, long time, as a teacher. I wish I could go back to my like early teacher self and be like, get out of the, you know, the blinders, like, and be who you want to be, and that's what that's why I say all the time when I work with administrators in school districts is you got to let your teachers be who they are, right?
Hmm.
You got to
Absolutely.
trust them. Nobody else in my district does what I do, and that's okay. Other teachers do things different ways. We have common tests, we have common expectations and things, but because I'm passionate about the way that I teach, it transfers to the kids.
Correct.
And that's the number one lesson I think we need to get the teachers, administrators, school boards, governors, whatever.
Oh, I always jokingly say that children are like the raptors in Jurassic Park, where they could sense out, just like the raptors were checking the fence for weakness. They check their teachers for phoniness, and they check their teachers for insincerity. And once they find it, they know.
Yep.
And so uh, you're absolutely right. It is very it's crucial. You can't survive in this industry by pretending. You have to be yourself. You have to find your passion, and share that passion, and it will resonate. I think Johnny Carson once said, like, if you buy the bit, you buy the gag. And if you're not if you can't sell, if you don't believe in what you're presenting to the children, they're not going to buy into it. And it's so clear, Tim, that you're very passionate about what you do, and the children that you encounter, I'm sure every day, benefit from having you in the classroom.
Yeah, I think that's a fair, yeah, and I wish everybody could do that, and I hope people do. If
Right.
whether it's sports, sewing, baking, I don't care what it is. If you're passionate about something and you can find a way to integrate it somehow, some way, it just lends that authenticity, like you're saying, to the kids, and they know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tim Smythe, you are you're doing good work. You're doing a great thing. I'm so happy to have professionals like you in the industry, and I think everyone is better for it. Tim, if we want to follow you, and if we want to uh, just share our ideas and share our thoughts with you, where can people find you? We have teachingwithcomics.com. Where else can people reach out to you?
So there's also a Teaching with Comics Facebook group or Facebook page. There's also a comic book teachers Facebook page that I'm the administrator for, but it's just teachers and publishers and authors, comic book teachers on Facebook. I'm also at History Comics on Twitter and Instagram. Teaching with Comics on TikTok, much to my children's chagrin that I am now experimenting with TikTok a little bit. But yeah, I mean, and my website's probably just the best place to kind of get that start where I am and how to find me. I'm like a bad penny, like I turn up all the time, and I just like to share what I do.
Well, I'm glad you do. I'm glad you do. It's clear that you're passionate about it, and it's an amazing thing. Tim, thank you very much for coming on to the show tonight. And we're all better for it, brother. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Tom. Thanks.
All right, everybody. I'm Tom Tormey. This was Tim Smythe. We were talking about teaching with comics. This was Nerds Night Out. Have a great night, everybody. Be well and stay safe.